This video is going to cover everything wrong with PoE 2. Grinding Gear Games' latest announcement included a lot of positive in-game changes, but they didn't really touch on the campaign or leveling experience for new players. So that is where this video is focused. PoE 2 is supposed to be the game that introduces new players to the franchise, and while it is definitely doing that, there are some major issues that need to be addressed. Now, don't get this twisted. As a first-time PoE player myself, I am truly loving this game and I highly recommend it. This is just meant as feedback, so feel free to add your own input down in the comments. So let's jump into it. Hands down, the biggest issue is the gear system, and I actually think this is why so many people complain about the campaign's difficulty. Loot drops are completely random, regardless of the class you play. While this doesn't seem like a big deal as you progress throughout Act 1, it becomes a noticeable progression block halfway into Act 2, with a lot of players saying that the final Act 2 boss is bricking their character. I personally came to this realization at the end of Act 1 and while working throughout Act 2. I noticed that 90% of the loot I was dropping, I was either vendoring it for gold or disenchanting it for orbs. 9% of the loot was usable, but much worse than what I currently had, and the last 1% was an actual upgrade. Now, I did eventually figure out that in order to find upgrades, I had to either buy it from the vendors or rely on RNG orbs, but this system feels really bad as a new player. Now, hear me out. I've played a lot of games, and when I think about where I'm going to get my gear upgrades from, it's coming from a badass boss or a rare enemy, not the vendor, which is where I normally just sell my junk. Typically, their items are there just for appearances. Now, I'm going to go off on a slight tangent here, and this might be an unpopular opinion for veteran PoE players, but in all honesty, I just don't like this crafting system, if you can even call it that. Completely relying on RNG for everything is just a pain in the ass, and it honestly reminds me of gacha mechanics. Yes, you can use more specific upgrade items, but it's still completely random on stats, and the constant juggling is just not appealing to me. I'm still playing, I'm still grinding, and I'm still tinkering, but it's something I wish was done a lot differently. But back on topic here. I think the campaign needs a more personal style loot system in order to ensure players are adequately geared for the content. The reason being is that once those new players have fully completed the campaign, they are much more time invested and thus more open to learning the crafting system for the end game. Next, let's talk about respecking. Any point you wish to reallocate any of your passive skills, it will cost you gold. Now, while this makes sense for the end game, it restricts players from experimenting with different builds. Just for example here. My monk was about level 45 when I completed all 3 acts. I liked focusing on lightning, so I went very heavy on lightning skills. When I started the cruel difficulty, I thought maybe I'll respec and try out a complete frost build for the cruel acts. Once I cleaned my tree, it was going to cost me roughly 100,000 gold, which was basically everything I had earned throughout the first 3 acts. This is a heavy price for players that are just trying to figure out what they want to play. Now, could I have spent all my gold and done this? Sure. But I'm not just respecking my skill points. I need to buy and craft new gear to work with my build, which I can't do if I have no gold. This just makes me feel completely locked in to that build that I have been playing, with the only real way to try a different build by starting a brand new character. So while leveling, eliminate the gold cost for respecking. Let players respec as much as they want so they can truly find their playstyle. Once you clear the campaign, give a message prompt. Tell the player that they are about to be locked into their build and further respecs will now cost gold. Give them the option to either one final respec or to continue and have future respecs cost. Maps. And I'm not talking about the end game here. The maps throughout the campaign are just way too damn big. Now, big is not necessarily an issue. Normally, I like big maps, especially when they're very pretty to look at, which is most of PoE. But most of the maps are just empty. Maybe they haven't added everything yet. Maybe they will have more events and locations once it's out of early access, but as it currently stands, there's too much random exploring with nothing to feel satisfied about. I really started to feel this near the end of Act 2, and I really felt this in Act 3. Going on a slight tangent here, but I'm still relating this to maps. Act 3 is way too freaking long. I honestly thought it was never going to end. I cleared every single map entirely throughout Act 1 and Act 2 with 0 issues. I still felt like the maps were too big and empty, but I was comfortable with the progression. Act 3, on the other hand, I cleared about the first half of Act 3 before I was just exhausted. I don't know if they are different, but the zones in Act 3 actually felt bigger than the previous acts. It got to the point that I would just run throughout the entire map, ignore all of the mobs, and activate each checkpoint. Once I had all the checkpoints, I would zone out, then I'd zone back in, and use the checkpoints just to hit the events that I needed to hit. I was doing everything possible to try to get through these zones as quickly as I could. And like I said, maybe they're adding in more events after early access, but if not, they definitely need to reduce the size. The honor system in the trials of the S word, I'm going to butcher this, Sekhemas. This might be a hot take, but this system just feels bad and cheesy. And if you haven't done the trials, here's a quick summary. It's multiple rooms that you have to progress through with a boss in the final room. Each room adds a negative affix, like taking increased damage or mobs dealing more critical hits to you, and these affixes do not fall off and they transfer to the next room. You have an honor bar at the bottom, which decreases every single time you're hit by an enemy. The amount of honor you lose depends on how strong the attack is. And if your honor reaches 0, you fail and have to start all over. You are already punished with the affixes. Having a second punishment just seems like overkill and only adds frustration, not satisfaction to this mode at all. My first suggestion would be just to remove the honor system, since I just don't think it adds anything to the experience. However, I think a common complaint with its removal would be that it's too similar to the Trial of Chaos. So here's another idea. Maybe use the honor system as a bonus reward system. More honor means additional chests or like higher quality chests once the trial is completed. This way you're still technically penalized when hit, but it doesn't result in a complete failure. And one comment I want to make on the Trial of Chaos, either nerf it or increase the level requirement, because I breezed through every zone and every boss, but the Trial of Chaos was impossible on my monk at the level requirement. I went back around 10 levels over the requirement and then I was able to complete it. Now I'm just going to cover some minor things here. First is a suggestion for gear comparison. When comparing gear, show the actual gain and loss of stats as opposed to just the actual modifiers. It's already like Diablo, so just take Diablo 4 system. Red is what I'm losing, green is what I'm gaining. It just makes gear comparison much quicker and more friendly. Next, let the camera zoom out just 2 more scrolls. This isn't a game-breaking thing, it's more of just a nuisance. Some bosses felt like I had to run out of view in order to avoid a mechanic, but then I get hit by the next mechanic because the boss was off screen and I couldn't see the telegraph. I know they mentioned in their update that they are addressing enemy ability ranges, so I'm hopeful that this will no longer be an issue, but I'd still like to zoom out just a tad bit more. Next, Temporal Bubble. This isn't too bad by itself. It's annoying, but it's manageable. However, Temporal Bubble and HP regeneration, Jesus Christ, fuck this combo. Even worse, I had an elite with Temporal Bubble, HP regen, and cold attacks. I literally died just to get a different combo because the game basically said, fuck you to my monk. Next, reduce loot drops or increase inventory space. And I know they originally buffed loot drops at launch because players were complaining, but now it's just too much. And I also know about loot filters, so don't suggest that. Remember, this is only speaking about the campaign and leveling. If I picked up every piece of loot that drops, I'd have to teleport back to town after every 4 packs of mobs. The frequency of teleporting back to town happens right as I'm gaining momentum on my character. Now, I just don't pick up anything unless it's at least magical, but the loot just seems like overkill. By the way, this isn't a complaint about rare or unique. They do still feel rare and unique, so don't worry about that. Finally, I think all monsters respawning when you die is annoying and completely unnecessary. You already die. That's the punishment. Don't make me have to trek back through a bunch of trash just because I got one shot by an on-death effect or body trapped by high movement mobs. Just my final closing thought here, because this is very negative. I truly think this is an amazing game, and the campaign itself is so goddamn good that I'm genuinely excited for the next acts to be released. I'm having a blast playing the game. So what do you think? Do you agree? Disagree? Do you have your own suggestions? Let me know down in the comments. Shout out to these channel members. Show some support by liking the video and subscribe if you like gaming content. Extra support can be given by becoming a channel member. It's 99 cents a month and gives you early ad-free access to all my videos. Finally, check out my merch store for Prefessional merch. I'll see you in the next one.